So, well, I'll say it again, man. I think this is the last election. If Trump doesn't win, this is the last election.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think people, and a lot of people are waking up and realize that have been lifelong Democrats.
Well, Joe Rogan has officially endorsed Donald Trump. That's a bit of the endorsement that you just heard in this episode that he hosted with Elon Musk. Now, Rogan announced the endorsement in a tweet as well, promoting his interview with Musk, saying, "The great and powerful Elon Musk, if it wasn't for him, we'd be effed. He makes what I think is the most compelling case for Trump you'll hear, and I agree with him every step of the way. For the record, yes, that's an endorsement of Trump. Enjoy the podcast." Now, what did Musk say exactly that Rogan might have found compelling? He said a lot of interesting things, including claiming that there will be no more elections if Kamala Harris gets elected. Because why not? Why not? Why don't we just engage in weird hyperbolic nonsense? Saying that Kamala Harris will shut down X completely if she wins by sicking the Justice Department on them. And also saying that Trump got roasted too hard at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Now, Rogan acknowledged that Trump is not a perfect candidate. In fact, in the past, he was on the record saying he didn't even want to host Donald Trump on his podcast because he didn't want to help Donald Trump. But eventually, obviously, he did have Trump on his podcast. That might have swayed Rogan as well. But Rogan excused all the crazy BS he spews by saying that he just doesn't have time to figure out the truth. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
Look, I don't think he has the time to go into things like very deeply.
Yeah.
And so I think he could probably be influenced by a bunch of people, like these Marjorie Taylor Greene type people who come to him with some wild ass theory.
Sure.
He might be, and I think there's a lot of that stuff that gets fed to people on purpose so that they'll say incorrect things so that they're easy to dismiss.
Sure.
And I think there's also a lot of people that just make up and they tell you the earth is flat, and then a bunch of people watch a YouTube video and they believe it.
So we're gonna take a trip back to memory lane and remember some of the things that Rogan had to say about Trump previously. But Cenk, I really think this is about the fact that he had Trump on the podcast, he had Vance on the podcast, he had Elon Musk on the podcast. I watched Trump's appearance, I watched about half of Vance's appearance, I didn't watch any of Elon Musk's, but the reason why I bring that up is they had friendly conversations. They seemed to enjoy each other's presence and company, and that's gonna leave an impression on Rogan. In fact, one of my critiques of Rogan has always been that he's very impressionable and tends to just agree with the last person he spoke to. So, look, am I being too critical when I say that, Harris might have made a mistake by not going on the podcast?
Yeah. Look, let's come back to Harris, because Harris is an interesting case, and especially in regards to Rogan. First, let me address the things that Elon and Rogan said. So it's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So later in the program, we're gonna tell you about how the Democrats did some cheesy moves in the primary, which is classic Democratic Party. But the idea that if the Democrats win, there won't be any more elections is just nuts. No Democrat has ever said that. No Democrat's ever gone in that direction. In fact, the Democrats have the opposite problem. The Democrats usually do very little when they're in office. The idea that they would upend the entire system and really anger their donors, you don't know the Democrats at all, It's just a totally mindless, ridiculous, purposely stupid conspiracy theory, because it's Elon going, oh yeah, just because Trump says he'll end the elections, oh yeah, Kamala's gonna end the elections. Ha ha, got you, now we're even. No, you're not even, and you sound like a child who knows nothing about politics. And so I was just on something called Spaces on X. Those are like the audio panels that they have, and then Elon joined in. And of course, everybody on X is like, reveres him. And they're like, oh, Elon. And every question started with, sir, you are the greatest. Can I please tour your facilities? And oh, thank you for existing and letting us bask in your presence. I'm like, guys, you're the tough guy populist standing up to the establishment. This is the richest man in the world. And he's, in my opinion, obviously manipulating you for his own financial reasons, which I'll get back to. Anyways, he comes out and goes, oh yeah, we're easily gonna win. Because they're all pumping in the idea that Trump is already won. It's just a matter of how is the media and the establishment are going to deal with it. So what is their theory on that? Their theory is, well, since there's so many less mail-in ballots this election cycle, especially in Pennsylvania, as opposed to 2020, that must mean that Donald Trump is going to win because he wins day of voting historically. So since not a lot of Democrats mailed it in, well, that's it. The Republicans are going to win. Except in 2020 there was COVID, and that's why the Democrats who were afraid to go outside did massive mail-in voting. Of course, there was going to be less mail-in voting in Pennsylvania and everywhere else in this election by Democrats and Republicans. Like, do you not know that? And you're like a rank amateur who thinks they know something about politics?
Yeah.
Or are you lying on purpose?
It's, in my opinion, irresponsible for anyone to claim like, and I get why people do it, right? Like they want to put optimism out there in regard to their preferred candidate, get their base jazzed up and make it seem as though there's no way that your preferred candidate is going to lose. I see it happening on the Democratic side as well. The truth is,
100%.
guys, the truth is we don't know. Okay, like I don't want to make any predictions because the polls are so close. Looking at the average of polls, yes, I get it. There's that Iowa poll, which is a bit of an outlier that shows Kamala Harris winning in Iowa, and I get that pollster has a good reputation, but it's one poll, and you can't put too much weight behind that. I have no idea who's going to win. The aggregate of polls, the average of polls indicates that it's very close, to the detriment of the country, honestly, because I'm worried that if the race ends up being too close, there's going to be like a lot of fighting. It's going to be contested. We'll see what happens, but I can't make a prediction. What do you think?
So look, we started the program today at noon Eastern, and the first thing that Michael Shore and I did, and Michael's here and he's going to give us up to date results from the election as we get going here. The very first thing I did was my official prediction, and my official prediction was, I don't know. I don't know. Number one, the polls are absolutely tied. Number two, there are unlikely voters on both sides. Historically, Trump brings them out 2016, 2020, but Democrats in 2022 and special elections in 23 brought out the unlikely voters. Both sides have data on there, have some data to back up what they're saying. We've been over it a million times. I think Anna and I seem to be the only ones who say no idea, and there's really no way of knowing. But everyone disagrees. Yeah. So like Democrats and some of our own analysts and hosts say Democrats are definitely going to win. Kamala Harris is definitely going to win. Yeah. Some are less sure, like likely going to win, et cetera. I go over I'm bilingual, I speak both languages, right? So I go over to whether it's Spaces, X, other places that I interact with right wing. Oh my God, guys, you have to understand, they are so positive that they're going to win. They think they've already won. So both sides, in their own bubbles, 100% believe they're going to win. So one side is going to get absolutely shocked tonight.
I know.
They're going to fall over from like disbelief.
Well, maybe not tonight because it's unlikely that we're going to know the full results of the race tonight, right?
Well, I'll just say this though, yes and no, because remember Pennsylvania is going to close in about an hour and 10 minutes. No, sorry, my clock in here is wrong. In about an hour and 40 minutes, this clock is throwing me off. Okay, sorry, it's gonna close soon. Okay, so that was a great moment there. Anyways, when Pennsylvania closes, I doubt
close at 8 p.m.
Yeah, 8 p.m.
local time. Yeah.
Yeah, and right now it's 6:20 local time, so an hour and 40 minutes. Okay, so when it does, I don't know that it gets called immediately. I don't know that it gets called tonight, et cetera. But if one of them has much more unlikely voters than we expect, if one side is correct about how certain they're going to win, that they're going to win big, Pennsylvania can get called in a couple of hours and this thing's over, right? So Pennsylvania will not decide it on its own, but whoever wins Pennsylvania has a massive advantage. Intensely likely to win, right? There's a couple of different ways, we'll get into it in just a little bit, about different ways to win without Pennsylvania. So it might drag on for a week or it might be over in an hour, so you don't know. Now back to Anna's question about Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz should have done infinitely more media and way more interviews. You know who would have been great on Joe Rogan? Tim Walz.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, so another story we have in the rundown, I hope we get to, Tim Walz interacting with Trump voters. Oh my God, it was gold. He was so good at it. because he's the only one out of the four that's a real human being. And you could have a real conversation with him, and he'll tell you he's a knucklehead, but then he'll know so much about farming, and he can prove that he got things done in Minnesota. So, but should Kamala Harris have gone on Rogan? I don't know. Kamala Harris is a mystery to me. I don't know that she could do a 3-hour interview. I don't know that she could have a real conversation and sound like a normal human being and not a fake politician. I'm being honest,
well,
right?
She'd have to be comfortable dropping the canned talking points and all of that and just have a conversation. Just like let loose, let go, have a good time. And look, I hear what you're saying about Tim Walz being the only real person, right? Because he comes across as a genuine, sincere, normal American. But I will also say that from what I saw, JD Vance did a good job presenting himself as like the everyman, like a normal person himself. Like he handled that conversation really well. You might disagree with his politics and his policies, and I hear you on that. That's not what we're talking about. Just the way he presented himself, he came across as way more likable in that conversation.
Yeah, so everybody's a little bit different, guys. So JD Vance is by far the best actor out of the four of them. So he's got his role down pat. Remember, he's a venture capitalist, and his main goal in winning here is corporate tax cuts and deregulation. So he's a giant, like a person who helps corporate world and corporate rule in an enormous way, right? But when he talks, he's like, oh yeah, I'll tell you, I got this mom and I got this grandma and I got the cemetery where I buried all my family because I'm the Zodiac killer. No, okay, that's Ted Cruz.
None of that came up.
Right, so he seems like he's being genuine if you're not well versed in it. Kamala Harris is the worst of them in terms of acting. Donald Trump, no, actually, to be fair, Donald Trump is the worst actor. He can't act if his life depended on it because he'll just admit everything. He'd be like,
he is who he is, and it comes across very clearly in every media appearance that Trump does.
Yeah, he's like, my advisors told me not to say this, but I'm gonna protect women even if they don't like it, okay? Yeah, well, all right, well, you're not acting. You seem like a legitimate clown and scary person. So they're all different, but the bottom line is media, especially interviews, are worth their weight in gold, literally. You're getting a minute ad on Rogan or ABC or CNN can cost you a fortune, right? Going on there and talking for 3 hours is the equivalent of tens of millions of dollars in free media. So the Democrats turning that down is totally irresponsible. Plus, Anna's right, Rogan is so impressionable. If Tim Walz went on last, he might have endorsed Kamala Harris and Walz, right? Instead, they just let the other side take that audience. To be fair, that audience was already plus 35 Trump.
So before we get to what Rogan had to say about Trump's policies a few years ago, I wanted to just give you a peek at how Trump took the news that Rogan decided to endorse him over Kamala Harris. Let's take a look.
So somebody that's very, very respected asked me to do his show 2 weeks ago, and I said, why not? And to me, it's very big because he's the biggest there is, I guess, in that world by far. Somebody said the biggest beyond anybody in a long time. And his name is Joe Rogan, and he's never done this before. And it just came over the wires that Joe Rogan just endorsed me. Is that good? Thank you, Joe. That's so nice. And he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. And he tends to be a little bit more liberal than some of the people in this room.
We live in a topsy-turvy world, man. I remember in the last election, certainly during the primary cycle, Rogan had a conversation with Bernie Sanders. I remember Bernie Sanders getting so much hate from the left because he had the audacity to go on the largest podcast in the country. I thought that was a good idea. I'm glad that Bernie had done that. But anyway, Rogan loved him, and Rogan supported him after that. So it's just really interesting how you can go from supporting someone like Bernie Sanders to now endorsing Donald Trump. I know that there were some Sanders supporters and voters in 2016 who ended up supporting Donald Trump because of the anti-establishment message, but obviously very different policies and politics.
Yeah, but I'm not that surprised by that. So first, real quick on Trump, he's like, he's never done that before. That's not true. He endorsed Bernie. He's endorsed before, but that's a usual typical thing for Trump. So now to Rogan, look, I wrote about this in a recent op-ed I did on Newsweek. There's two different political spectrums. There's the left and right one. And on that one, Bernie and Trump couldn't be further apart. Trump's all for corporate tax cuts and deregulation and dividing us. Instead, Bernie's trying to bring us together, higher wages for the average man, et cetera, right? On the populist establishment spectrum, though, that's a second spectrum. Bernie and Trump are perceived to be on the populist end of that and against the establishment. And that's where Rogan is. Rogan isn't really left or right. He has a ton of right-wing positions, the anti-trans positions, blah, 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 right? But he's pro-choice. He's, and sometimes he questions the corporate tax cuts, et cetera, et cetera. So he's not left or right really as much as he's populist. The problem with Rogan is not that he's populist or where he is on the left-right spectrum. The problem is he's too impressionable. So he can't see that Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump don't have the same policies. They might both sound populist, but Trump's a fake populist who says give everything to my donors, including the guy you just had on, Elon Musk. Elon Musk is asking for giant subsidies. He receives about $890 million already in tax credits from the government. He's asking for deregulation so he could do God knows what with cryptocurrency, et cetera. He's asking for lower taxes. That is none of that is within a billion miles of a populist position. So they've taken these guys who are super angry at the establishment, the right wing, populist right, and they've totally misdirected them towards corporate power again. And it's so frustrating because Rogan is not a grifter. He has so much money, he doesn't need to grift, et cetera. He's just getting hoodwinked by both audience capture and guest capture because he has nonstop right wingers on.
All right, we're out of time, but just wanted to note, one of the things that Rogan was very critical toward Trump on, in the past at least, and he got a lot of backlash from Trump supporters over this, was Trump's immigration policies. But who knows where he stands on that issue today? It'd be really interesting to hear how he kind of, deals with that conflict, where he stood on immigration before and where he is today. He could have changed his mind, you never know.
So I was recently talking about how trust in media is severely declining. A lot of you guys are just as skeptical of mainstream news as I am. This doesn't come as a surprise considering an MSNBC producer admitted the network is doing all it can to help Kamala Harris win, prioritizing Democratic Party interests over objective coverage. That doesn't help anybody. So let's dive into this story with the help of Ground News to add transparency to a very biased news landscape. Now, they're an independent, nonpartisan app and website we're working with because they're designed to expose hidden agendas influencing the news you consume, like which way an outlet politically leans and who's funding them. That's very important. They even created an entire news feed called The Blind Spot, dedicated to surfacing important stories that are left out of the right or left media bubble, like the one an MSNBC producer claimed the network intentionally aligns their daily message with Kamala Harris. Ground News found just over 20 sources reporting on it, with almost zero coverage coming from the left. I can also see who owns those outlets, and none are from media conglomerates. Nearly every headline listed there is from independent news sources outside the mainstream media bubble. But that's what makes Ground News so great. It's really easy to diversify how you stay informed on the platform and find their original reporting, like the tweet posting the undercover video of the producer admitting it all. Outlets across the political spectrum are guilty of selective reporting influenced by corporate agendas, making what Ground News is doing not only revolutionary, but crucial right now. They're fixing what's been broken in the news landscape for a long time by giving us the tools to think critically based on all the facts. So go to Ground, that's GROUND.news/TYT to try it out for yourself. Our viewers are getting a massive 50% off their top tier Vantage plan. You can use it to help with your research and stay accurately informed on the most pressing issues we discuss every day. Find the link in the description box below the video. If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.